Hello everyone, welcome to Are You Around the World? Thank you for joining us here today this evening. We're very happy to see you all. My name is Millie Chu and I'll be the moderator for this evening. We're very lucky to have 4 panelists here with us today. I'll introduce them in a little bit. They'll be sharing some of their experiences, thoughts as domestic and international students here at Rutgers. But before we hear from them, let me quickly go through our schedule for this evening as we have very exciting things planned. We'll first start off by hearing from our 4 panelists about their personal stories of living and studying overseas. Then we'll have some question and answer time where all of you guys, the audience, will have a chance to ask questions or even share some of your related experiences. After the panel discussion ends, we'll have time for networking and food. So please feel free to stay, socialize, and interact with each other. Okay, without further ado, let's get the panel discussion going by getting to know each of them. Panelists, please wave to the audience when you're being introduced so that everyone can know who you are. First, we have Alsu. Alsu is an international undergrad student from Turkey. She's currently in her junior year, majoring in political science and minoring in philosophy and German. Next, we have Iram, who is an international student from India, majoring in healthcare analytics and intelligence at the business school. She's a graduate student and will be graduating by the end of this semester, so very exciting for her. Moving on, we have Brianna, who is a domestic undergrad student, graduating by the end of this semester too. She's majoring in public health and minoring in psychology. Last but not least, we have Shreya, who is also a domestic undergrad student. She's studying public health on a pre-med track and is currently a sophomore. That's a quick introduction to each of our panelists. Hopefully you got to know each other a little bit better. Now let's hear from them about their international experiences and why they wanted to visit another country. We'll start with Shreya.
So for me, I'm from New Jersey, but I felt like moving from my hometown to New Brunswick, I learned a lot about myself and living independently. And I thought that going abroad would kind of just expand on that experience, and you get to learn, you really get a sense of independence, and also you get to learn a lot about the world as a whole. So I thought it was a really great learning experience for me.
Well, I'm from Pennsylvania, but growing up I did a lot of traveling. I have been international before I studied abroad, but I always had a love for traveling. So growing up, I always knew I wanted to go study abroad. Even though it was just 2 weeks, it still was the experience I was looking for.
For me, it was more of a dual intention. The first reason being a world-class education, which the United States offered. And also with my specialty, it's a new and upcoming field, and what better place to be than where all the research is happening. So that was one reason. And second was obviously adventure calling. Who doesn't want to live on your own in a completely new place, experience new culture, have the freedom, have the independence, and also get the exposure that the world has to offer?
For me, it was the matter of better quality of education. I wanted to have the best opportunities I could have for my education and be exposed to the opportunities that the world has to offer, along with just experiencing life aside from my family.
Great answers, everyone. Very insightful. Now I have some questions for you all. The first question is for Iram and Shreya. Can you describe to us your first thought about living in a new country? What do you wish you had known about your host country before you left home? We'll start with Iram.
Okay, so for me, I come from Mumbai, India, which is a place that is warm throughout the year. And I started in the spring semester. I arrived here on a really cold Christmas morning. And I feel like no number of times looking at the temperature equals to what it actually feels like when you step out of the airport. So that was the first thing I wish I was better prepared for. And the second thing that really bothered me is it's impossible to get around New Jersey if you can only use public transport. Like I was staying in Jersey City and I needed to come down to New Brunswick and I had to change 2 buses and 1 train to just come down to the university. It was something I did not anticipate because back in India, public transport is super easily available, it is super affordable. So these were a couple of things I feel like I could have been more prepared about.
So for me, I had been to Italy once before, but I realized that studying there is a totally different experience from vacationing in a place. You're not just going to tourist attractions, you're really actually trying to understand the locals and integrate with them. So the one thing that I do wish I had prepped for beforehand is just learning the language more thoroughly, because you go to a store or a cafe and they don't speak English at all. So in a way, even though I regret not studying it, I'm also kind of happy that I got to learn it when I was there, and I got to learn directly from locals and apply what I learned. So I thought that was a really great learning experience for me.
The next question I have here is, what observations do you have about the country in which you lived that surprised you? Elsa, would you like to start?
For me, was communication style in general. In Turkey, we have this hierarchical communication style between older to younger, or like professor to student, which kind of surprised me that here it's more friendlier in terms of communication. And alongside with that, Americans use a lot of exclamation points. I've come to notice in Turkey, our exclamation points are only for fire, one exclamation point. But here, to me, it feels like the exclamation point is just you're yelling at me that you're thinking me. So I write very boring text, and communication was something that I was adapting throughout.
Next we have Brianna.
So while I was in Greece, my class was focused on studying the lifestyles of the Mediterranean. So the biggest observation was obviously their diet. The biggest thing was definitely they eat a lot of vegetables for breakfast, which here in America we don't really see. We see a lot of pastries, waffles, pancakes, bacon, and that. So they're very health oriented. And then the second thing was definitely they walk a lot more than we do. They, going back to Miriam, what she was saying was they walk because the hills are so steep and high, and they're also very rocky, the roads. So just walking is easier to get around. And they're also always outside. So they definitely value their time in the sun. It's also very hot there. But they're always gardening, and they like to grow their own crops, which is also something that's different. And also their nightlife is it's more focused for the social aspect. So we did actually take a dancing class because that's something that they do enjoy. And a big thing too was for their diet was their dinners were very focused about being social. So here it's very rushed and we're just eating to eat. Instead it's focusing on talking and getting to know each other and connecting. So that was definitely a big observation that I noticed.
Yeah.
For me, coming from India, I feel like what surprised me the most was how friendly people are. I would just walk into a store, just wanting to browse around, and someone would come oh hi, how are you? How's your day? Can I help you out? Which is not something that we see commonly in India, and obviously you adapt to where you are. So I was here for the entire semester. I started doing saying hello, how are you? And when I went back to India in the summer, I went to the store to buy something I was like, hello, how are you? I was like, why are you asking me that? I was like, sorry. But that was what surprised me the most.
This question is for Shreya and Miriam. While abroad, did you interact with the local culture, or did you tend to stay with other students like you? Here, sure.
Yeah, so for me, I went through a Rutgers program, and it was at an American university, so there were other students from American universities like Northeastern and other schools like that. But the students at the university were also local Italians, so in my classes I had other college-age students who were locals, and so in that way I got to really connect with them because they're people who are in my same age groups and talking about things like music or what there is to do around town or what their favorite food is. You really got to connect with them, and in general, just the places that we would go, even though I lived with other American students, our neighbors the building next door would be just local Italian families. So that really taught me a lot. We get to see how people live their day-to-day life, so it's really cool to see.
sorry, I forgot the question.
That's okay.
I was so focused on my answer.
When you're abroad, did you interact with the local culture or did you stay with
So while I've been over here, I feel like I've interacted with both the local culture as well as international students. My interactions with the local culture would probably be more in professional settings, such as where I work, my internship, in my classes and coursework when we're teamed up with these people or we have projects, stuff like that. But just to like hang out and I think to relax, I mostly would go out with other international students. Not because it's not culturally compatible or something like that. I feel like we as international students get very excited about things that the locals could not care less about. Like, oh my gosh, it's snowing outside. So, in that sense, I feel like as an international student, you sometimes want to do things with other people who are as excited about it as you are. And also, I feel like, as I spoke about transportation, so most domestic students have their cars and they want to go to like nice faraway places to eat dinner, things like that, which is sort of inconvenient for us. You have to get an Uber, have to use public transport, things like that. So I feel like in certain sense, getting to interact with the local culture has been super helpful in terms of like, oh, this is a great place to eat. And this is something you should definitely try out. But in terms of like just going out to relax, it's most likely been international students like myself.
Also, has this experience of being around the world helped you to step out of your comfort zone and have positive interaction with people of other cultures and nationalities?
But definitely, the minute that I've gotten on a plane from Istanbul to here has been pushing your comfort zone because being away from your parents, your family, the culture you've been growing with is very far away. There's time difference, so you can't contact your parents immediately when you have a problem. And starting a life that is brand new and requires adapting and learning everything has been very pushing my comfort zone, but also it's very fulfilling.
Shreya, would you like to share?
Yeah, so for me, I definitely think I stepped out of my comfort zone. I think I gained a lot of insight into how, like, I have a lot of respect for international students because I realized I was only there for a month, but it's really challenging to pick up a completely new language and to, like, you know, live independently. So I really have to, like, you know, leave my life behind because I was only there for a month, but, like, I really gained a new perspective on that. So I think I, like, really learned a lot about not just myself and, you know, how much I like, you know, exploring new cultures and learning about other people, but I also gained a lot of respect, you know, for the international students here, and I understand kind of their situation a little more.
Brianna?
So yeah, it was definitely out of my comfort zone. It was my first time traveling alone, both domestic and international. So right there, it's just stepping out of your comfort zone. But I think a big thing too was my fear of not making friends while abroad. Though there was 50 people going, I was bound to make a friend. I still had that fear. But it was kind of nice because once we got there, we all realized we had the same exact fear. So we all became really great friends, and we're still great friends to this day. But in terms of interacting and having a positive interaction with the locals, they were all so friendly and so accommodating to us because there is obviously a language barrier. We did not know any Greek, so going there was a little challenging, but luckily our professor does live there most of the year, so he obviously knows the language. So it was super helpful, but they were always willing to still somehow interact with us and still get us the best experience possible. An example is we did a tour of a winery in Leros, which is one of the Greek islands that still holds the Mediterranean lifestyle, so it was great for our class. But during that tour, he didn't know any English. The owner didn't know any English, so it was very challenging to understand the process of how to make wine when, you know, there's a language barrier. So obviously our professor stepped in, but he was still very open to answering any questions we had. It was super nice during the whole experience. So it was a big change stepping out of your comfort zone, but it was so worth it.
Definitely. So this question is for everyone. Is there one aspect of the culture you have experienced that you wish existed in your home country or the world over? Well, we can go down the panelists, starting with Elsu.
My experience was, as Iran previously said, saying just thank you and good morning to, I guess, strangers or the people at the grocery store. It feels very nice and it feels very friendly that you actually belong to a community in some way, which that kind of culture doesn't really exist in Turkey, and I wish it could. And I have one memory just a couple of months ago. I think it was a very, very cold New Brunswick winter, probably for the domestic people, it was just ordinary day. And I was freezing to my bone. And while I was getting something from, to be honest, I don't remember the setting, but the person said, while saying, "Oh, have a good day, stay warm," it just felt so nice and so friendly. And I was like, oh, I wish that we had a saying like that back in Turkey. Just someone's freezing and someone says, stay warm. It feels weird in Turkish, by the way. So that's my aspect.
For me, back in India, if someone invites you over for whatever reason, whenever you go to someone's house, you expect that they'll have like a warm cup of tea and a plate of biscuits with it. So usually when we go meet someone, you just expect that, okay, you're going to get something to eat and drink, which I feel like is not something that exists over here. I feel like it's just very welcoming in terms when you're meeting someone you've not met before, or someone you've, like it's a business meeting or just meeting a friend. I feel like it's so nice to have something to just eat and drink and do something together with the opposite person. It just makes conversation easier, helps you to be there for longer, and just have a more enjoyable time in general, which I feel like is something people all over the world should have, like bonding over food and drink.
From my perspective, over in Greece, their lifestyle is very relaxed. They do live longer lives, and that's kind of why we were studying there in Greece to understand why. But part of the reason is because of how relaxed their lives are. So they'll take an hour-long lunch break and go sit outside and enjoy the weather. But here in America, it's very rushed. And like I mentioned earlier with the dinner, like we just eat to eat, but there they really take their time and enjoy every moment of life. So I wish that would, apply here in America, but also all over the world.
I completely agree with that. Like mine is really similar. I think it's a couple European countries have the same lifestyle where it's just a lot more, easygoing. And I think for me, the thing that stood out the most is just their whole mindset around meals. Like the idea of like takeout food wasn't really something like you could even do in Italy. I know here, you pick up Starbucks on your way to class. There was no like place where you could get takeout coffee on the way to class. You sit down, you enjoy your coffee, you have a meal with your friends, with your family. I feel like here, food is kind of something we just, you eat a granola bar and you call that a meal. Like that's not really something that they would do in Italy. So I just kind of wish, we appreciated it, like slowed down, enjoyed a meal, because it's a time to like, share it with your loved ones.
Have any of y'all experienced culture shock? And if so, can you give an example? Brianna, would you like to start?
So like I mentioned in the beginning of this, I did travel internationally, so I kind of knew what to expect a little bit. I did know that the dinners took a while. So in a sense, not really, but it is definitely shocking to arrive in a new country by yourself. So in a sense, yes, but also no at the same time.
Drea?
I think one example of culture shock for me was just kind of the drinking culture there. I think it was definitely like interesting to see and it was fun to see, but it was just great to see like people out on the street and you meet strangers, and it's just a really fun, like lively environment, and it's a big part of their culture, which I appreciated. So I think I was just kind of surprised to see how much of a role it played in their culture.
I don't know if this classifies as culture shock or not, but I feel like over here the policemen are a lot more scarier than they are back in India. We see policemen all over the place over there, and we just look at them like ordinary human beings, and over here they're probably just like strolling down the street in just the whole uniform and the bulletproof vest and the gun, and they have the walkie-talkie going all of the time. It's just so overwhelming. Someone just came up to me to ask me if I needed help, and I freaked out. I thought I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, probably walking on a footpath I wasn't supposed to walk on or something like that. But that was something that I really found weird at the beginning.
My culture shock would be not being able to walk to even a grocery store, I guess. I don't have a car, and I desperately need one because I can't go to the grocery store, or I waste my day waiting for the bus. And in Istanbul, that's not a problem. You just go out, and in a 5-minute walk, you can just do whatever you need to do. So to this day, I still can't understand why every single person needs a car to go somewhere, but I've learned to deal with the problem.
What was your first example of experiencing the local culture?
I'll go first. So when we first arrived in Athens, so we were also getting to know each other. It was all fresh, and we were also jet lagged. But we first went out to dinner all together, all 50 of us, and we're sitting there, and it was, so nice, because we're all sharing experiences where we're from, getting to know each other. But overall, it was just like a great time. So that dinner was something it stood out to me, and I remember it still to this day.
So my first experience, we got like shuttled from the airport to our apartment, and then we were kind of like free to explore the city. So literally the first thing we did is there was a grocery store right downstairs from our apartment, so we just went down there, and that was kind of the first moment where I felt like, oh, this is a totally different country, because I didn't even know what half of the labels were saying. I had to Google Translate everything. And that was kind of my first moment where I was like, okay, I have to actually start learning the culture here, because I'm not going to be it's not going to be like going to your local grocery store back home. But that was I just remember that moment, just walking in, just not knowing what any of the labels were. Everything was just totally different.
For me, my very individual first interaction with the locals were my first time coming from my dorm to my grandparents' house, and I didn't have an internet, and I was traveling by train. I don't know, ignorance just gave me this kind of courage, I guess. And at one point, I had to just ask through every step of the way, and I remember that people were they're very helpful, and they were very understanding. People were someone didn't know the answer, just asking another person. So that day was both interesting and encouraging for me.
For me, there's a couple of things I would like to share on this. Shreya said, going to a supermarket. When you go to a supermarket in India and say you want milk, you get milk. If you've never been to a supermarket here, there's 20 different types of milk. And there's price per unit, and price per ounce, and price per whatever other unit it is. And coming from a country where they use a metric system, and it's just so simple, okay, I just want a bag of milk. It was super overwhelming going to the supermarkets here. I didn't know what milk I was supposed to buy, what eggs I was supposed to buy. I didn't know how to read the prices. And in India, we also have this concept of a maximum retail price, or an MRP, on each item that we buy. And I figured the same item was being sold for vastly different prices based on the location you buy it from. So that was something I found really weird. And then the second thing was, when you ask someone, okay, is this train going to XYZ, or is this the train on the red line or northeastern line or whatever, and they'll say yes. And say, okay, will this train go to XYZ? Yeah, just take the northbound train, just take the southbound train. How am I supposed to know where north is? So I feel like something that people expect you would know is not necessarily something you know. So that was another thing that I found really challenging in the beginning. I still can't figure out the northbound and southbound bus stops in Rutgers. So
Me neither, yeah. Thank you all for sharing. It's always eye-opening to hear from others about their personal and just experiences in general. And being an international student myself, I can definitely relate to a lot of the points that they have brought up. And I found them very interesting, so thank you again. And I'm sure the audience do too. So now it's time for the audience to shine, where you'll have time to ask any questions or share your experiences maybe. Is there anything that you're curious about that you want the panelists to answer? Any question at all? You can raise your hand, and we have a mic for you.
One question.
Thank you for your presentations, and I could relate to many of the things you did as an international student myself. I arrived here, several years ago, but I experienced most of the things you went through. Today, I wanted to just ask you if, just a second, I have a question. So I would like to know if, when you went abroad, if you had a chance to try new food and maybe try the local cuisine, and if you had a chance to learn something about the culture behind it.
So yeah, we did. So once again, I was studying the lifestyle, so that is definitely a big part of any lifestyle is your diet. So I did try to see for the first time, and it was amazing. And then the biggest thing there was the olive oil. So we had a whole entire class about olive oil. We drank it straight, and it was actually really good, which was super surprising. But yeah, we did try many, many different things, and especially unknown meat too. I'm not quite sure what it was, but we did try it. So yeah, we did enjoy, the meals.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I never really drank coffee that much until I went to Italy, but after that, I kind of developed a caffeine addiction because everyone there drinks coffee all the time, so I kind of just got on that. And in general, Italy, Italian food, I'm sure everyone loves Italian food, pasta, pizza, but also I got to try a lot of things I hadn't tried before, like risotto, a lot of desserts, different wines, cheeses, just local things, and also more authentic versions of them than what you would get if you go to a normal pizza place here.
I think for me, it's a bit of a challenge. When I think of American food, the only thing that comes to mind is a really greasy burger and fries. I'm not sure if that is the best version of American food, but I've heard that a lot of places have their own specialties, like the deep dish pizza from Chicago and the Philly cheesesteak and things like that. But for me, it was super surprising that there's little to no vegetable content in literally anything that you eat outside unless you actively look for a salad place. So that was something I found really surprising. Even getting fresh produce like fresh vegetables and fruits is more expensive than getting a plate of fries and a soda would be. If you want to buy packaged drinking water from a vending machine, it costs equal to or more than a soda would, which I found super surprising considering we get water for free everywhere in India. So that was something that I feel, I don't know, it's probably not a good thing, but I should not be saying that since I'm here.
For me, also, sadly, stereotype American food contains hamburger and fries. But when I came here, I found out that, especially if you're using the dining halls, was during Thanksgiving or Christmas days, they have these whole Thanksgiving dinners, for example, which I found out that that's not the case, and they're America has its own cuisine actually, but it's not that advertised as hamburgers. But it should be. But what shocked me the most is the breakfast culture, because the Turkish cuisine, breakfast especially, is mostly based on omelets with vegetables, tomatoes, all the green leaves, and But mostly is based on pastries and bagels. This is a very unpopular opinion, but I don't know what's the deal with bagels. I don't know. So that's something that shocks me, but it's also very interesting.
Any more questions from the audience?
All right, thank you for sharing all those things you did about yourself. It was very insightful, and it was just really cool hearing your experience. I know for me, I had a chance to travel to Italy a few years back, and something that I noticed about the culture over there is that they would eat a lot of bread with the different meals. And so I'm just curious, from your perspective and the different cultures that you've experienced, is there any particular maybe tradition that stood out to you that maybe you have hold on to this day? Because I know for me, now I've started to eat Italian bread a lot with my food. And I was also curious to know how much of the languages you guys were able to learn. Like, was it just certain phrases, or were you able to actually like learn different aspects of the language, and just how much? And so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so for me, like I said, it's definitely coffee is the one thing that I picked up. I got an espresso machine after I came back just because I missed it so much. And I think in terms of just like traditions or languages, I did definitely pick up a lot of languages or a lot of words. The one thing I picked up the most is everywhere you go, people say ciao to you, like it's hello, goodbye, everything. So that was the one thing I learned by the time I left. Like everyone that you see, you just say ciao to them. And also just like basic language terms, like, you know, where is this? How do I get there? I definitely would say I know a lot more than I did going into the country. So yeah, I think I got to learn at least the basics.
One of the traditions that I picked up on that is also very prevalent in their culture is they drink a lot of wine, especially at dinner. It was always at our table, whether we were eating as a big group or just individually with our small groups of friends or whatever it may be, but that was definitely a big thing there. And then in terms of the language, it was only 2 weeks, like I said, so I wasn't able to pick up on much, but I did learn one phrase that we said every single night at dinner, which was yamas, and that means cheers, so going hand in hand with the wine. But yeah, I think if I was there longer, I would have picked up more of the language, but also, I guess because we didn't really have to interact much with the locals who only spoke Greek, that kind of interfered with being able to pick up on the language. So it was just more of what our professor was teaching us. So it wasn't also repetitive either. So that's kind of why things didn't really stick that much. But yeah.
For me, I come from Mumbai, India, and all of my education, everything's been in English. But the English we use is the British system and not the American system. So I have to be very conscious of not having extra alphabets that we do have in the British system, like colors, flavors. We use COLOURS, and yours is just ORS. And also I feel like Americans use a lot of words like y'all, which is something I'd never heard of before. Like, what is y'all? And also they use the word appreciate a lot. Like now, literally every email I write, I use the word appreciate because that is what I realize people use over here. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Not much of a cultural difference apart from the whole burgers, fries, and soda.
For me, I had the reverse experience of Italy and coffee. So back in Turkey, we have this like Turkish coffee culture where after meals we sit and drink coffee with gossip or something like that. But here I find myself just quickly getting a cup of coffee and just running to classes. And sometimes I miss the feeling of just sitting down with a coffee rather than just rushing with a hot cup. And language-wise, back home, we've been learning English since first grade, so there weren't much surprises in terms of language. But sometimes I find myself, going back to the exclamation point thing. I am trying to be more mindful of that because, I don't want to write boring emails or texts, obviously. So yeah, that's what I picked up.
Are there any more questions? Would anyone like to?
Yeah. All right. So I was curious. So I know for some of you, this was an opportunity for you to really be able to step outside of your comfort zone, being able to study abroad like this. So I was just curious if you guys had maybe any words of encouragement to anybody who may be in the room, who may have some hesitancy about studying abroad. Like, what are some things that maybe got you through some questions or doubts that you had, and maybe some words of encouragement that you maybe can give that really made the experience fruitful, that you would want to encourage other people in the room who may be considering doing what you guys have done? So yeah.
Well, that's a great question. So relating back to one of my answers from one of the questions, definitely one of my biggest fears was not making friends. So all I have to say is just go and do it, because you will end up finding people. I remember during orientation after I committed to doing this, they said you're gonna make lifelong friends, and I was like, that's gotta be a joke. This is only 2 weeks. There's no way we're gonna be best friends by the end of this. And seriously, by the first day, we all had best friends. We made completely new friends, and it was also nice too because within my program it wasn't major oriented, so I met people from all different majors, which was also a good thing. So my biggest piece of advice was just go and do it, because it is a great time and it is an experience that you will never forget, because my friends and I will still talk about it all the time and all these memories that we did make with each other. So if you're considering, it's a really, really good idea.
Yeah, I would say for any domestic student or anyone who just wants to go to another country, I highly recommend it, because I had the same fear you're not going to make friends, you're going to be alone, stranded in another country. But people are really welcoming, whether it's the country you go to or even the people you go with. I met people even from Rutgers, through the study abroad program, who I never knew before, and people from other schools in the US, and just strangers who are traveling, who I came across, who I still am connected to on social media. So it's a great way to make connections with people outside of your day-to-day life.
For me, so the process we go through is kind of longer, I guess, from study abroad, so it may be kind of different. But my experience was that, if this is something that you need to do for better experiences, better quality of education, or just making friends and connections, memories, it's something is worth leaping towards, because at some point the place that you go to really becomes home. Right now, New Brunswick is very close to my heart, just as Istanbul is, because it has memories in it. So it may be scary at first, but second day is always better than the first day, third day is always better than the second day, it just goes on.
I think that was a great question you asked, and I feel whether you're going somewhere to study as an international student, or you're going for a study abroad, or whatever it may be, I strongly believe that it is your experiences that make you who you are. Irrespective of wherever life takes me, or any of us, I feel this experience really gives you something to talk about. I feel it makes you more independent, it makes you more confident, and it gives you the belief that you can rely on yourself. Wherever you go, but be it a job interview or wherever I go, I can confidently say that yes, this is something I can do, because I've done so much harder before this, something so much harder before this. So I feel it does make you stronger, it helps you develop as a person, and even if it's something as short as 2 weeks, I feel what she has is phenomenal. Why did I do that? I'm already an international student, I would have loved to study abroad. Just for the experience of it. So I feel just the more you see, the more you learn, the more you grow, the more people you interact with, I think it just adds to you as a person. So.
That makes me want to study abroad. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time, attention, and engagement. I hope that this panel discussion was informative and interesting. I think through these events, I realized that even with strangers, someone that you might not have seen before, might not have met before, we're able to find something to relate to each other, some similarities, even though we grow up in different cultures and grow up with different people. So it just puts into perspective for me that we are all in this together, experiencing the world. So thank you everyone for sharing. If there are no more questions, we can move on to the socializing part of this event. Interact with a stranger, maybe share your story and get to know theirs. So feel free to grab food, make friends, and have fun. Again, thanks to everyone for attending, and thanks to our panelists.